Go inside the Crimson Tide with your hosts Rodney Orr and Gary Harris, keeping you informed on everything Alabama. Tider Insider TV, brought to you by Tuscaloosa Tourism and Sports.
Our sympathies to Jamea's family following this unimaginable loss. This is a really difficult situation. We're continuing to support each other as we process this and balance school and basketball.
And good evening and welcome into Tider Insider TV, brought to you by Tuscaloosa Tourism and Sports with Rodney Orr. I'm Gary Harris, and that is Alabama head coach Nate Oates on Monday, speaking about this tragedy that occurred over the weekend here in Tuscaloosa on the University of Alabama campus, a series of events. And I have to tell you, Rodney, I was there at the press conference yesterday. I thought Coach Oates handled it as well as you could hope for in terms of showing sympathy for the victim and her family, showing empathy for his former player Darius Miles and his family. And it's just not something that as a college basketball coach or coach period that you ever want to have to go through, but it is the reality. And let's get into the details. On Sunday afternoon, former Crimson Tide player Darius Miles and 20-year-old Michael Davis were charged with capital murder in the early Sunday morning shooting death of 23-year-old Jamea Jonae Harris. Miles is 21 years old. In a newly released court document, investigators say that although Miles did not fire the weapon, it was his weapon that Michael Lynn Davis used in the fatal shooting. And tonight's game against Vanderbilt will be the first basketball game that the Crimson Tide has played since the incident. Let me bring Rodney in. And I've been on the radio 2 days. I've been on television for 2 days. You were on with me yesterday. And the first thing that you want to do is keep the, I think, what everybody's working to do is keep the tragedy at the forefront. That a 23-year-old mother lost her life. Her 5-year-old son is motherless. Someone is responsible and someone has to pay for that. The flip side of that is that Alabama basketball is having an incredible season. They're ranked number 4. They've only got 2 losses, no losses in conference. This is a Final Four type team, and basketball will go on, and they'll play tonight. But these young men, his friends, former teammates, you can try to process it all you want. You can try to prepare all you want. I'm sure they'll give a great effort tonight physically, but mentally you do wonder where their heads are at. This is awful.
Yeah, first of all, the tragedy itself. Certainly, as you mentioned, Gary, your heart goes out to the victim and their family and her family and, of course, her child and also Darius Miles as a young man. This is something. And
his family, his mother.
It's an incredible tragedy. There's no other way to put it. But now when you put it into perspective of, how does this impact the team, as you mentioned, mentally, I don't think it can have there's any way to cut it, but to say, look, it's going to be a difficult situation for not only Coach Oates, his coaching staff, but these young men to rebound.
Let me ask you this. Obviously, if you were playing at home tonight, you'd have the home crowd, but I imagine it would be subdued because most Alabama fans that I've talked to are just as sick about this as you can be. By being on the road, at least they went up last evening. They've been insulated today, having their meals, film sessions, treatment for, getting ready for the game. At least in that regard, they're together. And maybe in this case, after what has happened here in Tuscaloosa, it's better to be on the road tonight.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. Possibly could be. I think getting away from some of the distractions, if you want to call it that, because people are asking a lot of questions. And let's be honest, Gary, these players don't have the answers.
Right. But
they're being faced with the questions. So I think it probably is good, to get them away in that regard now as we're talking about as a basketball team. So it's going to be interesting to see how they respond, but it's a very difficult circumstance.
Yeah, and it's a big game. It's an SEC game in a place, Memorial Gym there in Nashville, where Alabama's had a lot of trouble winning over the years. Vanderbilt is not as good a team as Alabama, but they are coming off a big home win over Arkansas, and they're certainly capable of winning the game. So the players, maybe if nothing else, the basketball game is a respite from what they've been dealing with, and maybe they can just throw everything into the game and forget, at least for a couple of hours, about real life events that have impacted their lives and their team. And again, it's just one of those things you just wish would not have happened, but it did, and that's the reality that we're dealing with. And now it's time for Coach Talk. Following the incident on Sunday involving Darius Miles, head coach Nate Oates met with the media on Monday. And remember, he's not just a coach for these young men, but he's also a parent to 3 daughters. So he discussed, processing this as a coach and as a parent.
Yeah, I've got 3 daughters. Went through my mind how easily could have been one of mine. Tough situation. I've talked to Darius's mother multiple times yesterday. Very hard situation on both accounts. So, just continue to pray for Jamea and her family, although I didn't know them, but they're certainly in our thoughts and prayers. And
again, Rod, I think that he handled that so well on Monday. Listen, you are a parent. I'm not. You are. You got 4 kids. You got grandkids, and we understand Miss Harris, the victim, and her family, what her family's going through. It's got to be just don't even want to think about it as a parent, what her mom is dealing with. And the mom said they have not even told the little boy yet. But as I said, Darius has got a mother too, and she's in pain. As a parent, you can only imagine, I guess, what this is like and what both those families are dealing with.
Yeah, not the same situation. Obviously, I've dealt with some things too with my kids. Have been, certainly in some significant problems and issues and things that you do. And, Gary, you really, as a parent, sometimes it overwhelms you. So to have someone like Coach Oates to supply that support to Darius's mother is certainly something that I think, was wonderful, certainly comforting to her. But this is a really difficult situation on both sides. And again, we want to be extremely respectful to the victim and her family, but also to the young man. I mean, it's just it's just so bad on both sides.
Yep, and as we said, there's a basketball game to be played tonight, and Alabama is going to try to give its all, because this is a team that is having a special season. And we'll talk more about the basketball aspect now. Alabama is coming off a 40-point victory over LSU. They absolutely annihilated the Tigers. It was the largest win over LSU in program history. It's the largest win in the SEC since, I think, 2005 when Alabama beat Auburn with Mark Gottfried as the head coach, 94-53. Brandon Miller did it again. He had 31 points. Just a phenomenal player. Alabama 15-2 on the season, 5-0 in the SEC. And Rodney, here's what's remarkable. They've won the smallest margin of victory in the conference so far has been 11 points at Mississippi State.
Amazing.
They've won every game. They won it by 15 at Arkansas. They're 3 games at home over Ole Miss, Kentucky, and LSU. The margin of victory over this, it's 30 points. 2 20-plus point games in that 40-point win. This is a phenomenal basketball team.
Yeah, it's just really amazing, Gary. Not only the talent, we've talked about this repeatedly, just how the chemistry of this team, the way they've responded to success. And again, we talk about how do you respond to failure. I think sometimes more difficult for young players, especially, and they have a lot of young players on this team, is how do you handle the success? And I think, the way this team has handled the success is probably as impressive as anything I've seen.
Yeah, and when you look at this team, I sat there in Coleman Coliseum Saturday and, told some people what I believe. I said, this is a Final Four team. This is a national championship caliber team. Doesn't mean they're going to win it. But, you worry about injuries. You worry about getting in that tournament, winning, and just laying an egg. But then you have something like this happen. And it is impactful, not just in terms of the real lives of these young men, but also as a basketball team. And it's something that they are going to have to deal with. But Rodney, from a basketball standpoint, what I was struck by Saturday is even though they were at 59-22 at half, 37 points at half, game's over. Game's over at half. How often does that happen in the SEC? Not very often. But I watched that game, and even though they made 23 pointers, they were 20 of 54 from behind the arc, I didn't watch that game and think, well, this is an aberration. This is a fluke. I thought, you know what? They're not even playing as well as they can play. And I keep thinking they're a lot better now than they were this time last month. I think in February they're going to be better than they are now. March, I think they'll be better than they were in February. And hopefully in April they're still playing. Because this team, 3 freshman starters, I think they're still just scratching the surface of how good they can be.
No, I agree. But also, Gary, as you know how it plays out, they're going to hit a streak where they're going to have a difficult period. And it's how are they going to respond? Again, they've handled the success extremely well. I mean, beyond their years. But when they hit that bump in the road. How are they going to respond to that? That's going to be key.
Well, it starts tonight in Nashville, 7:30 tip at Memorial Gym on the SEC Network, and I'll have highlights, of course, tonight on WVUA 23 News at 10. One other Alabama basketball team is playing very well. Well, let's get to Brandon Miller first, as they may just retire this SEC Freshman of the Week, and then we'll get to the Bama women. This is the 5th time he's won it, Rodney. I mean,
unbelievable.
But you know what? I admire the SEC. You can't just say, well, we can't give it to him because he's won it so many times. I mean, every week he's just putting on a show.
It's amazing. I mean, he really is. He's so fun to watch, Gary. He's such a great player. And the consistency, again, we go back to the consistency and the performance that he's had, throughout the season. It's just been really amazing because, look, sometimes you have a young player and he has early success and, he hits a slump and he struggles and all this. But Brandon Miller has been pretty consistent for the most part throughout this season and playing at an extremely high level. Yeah,
the handles that he has with left and right-handed ball handling at 6'9", it's phenomenal. All right, now to the other Alabama basketball team that's playing very well. Sunday evening, the Crimson Tide captured a huge victory on the road in Oxford as they beat Ole Miss. Ole Miss was previously unbeaten in the SEC, 63-58, and the Tide did this without their 2 leading scorers, Brittany Davis and Megan Abrams. How about that? Wow. But Alabama was able to prevail. Sarah Ashley Barker had a big game. She had 16 points. Jada Rice had a double-double. And Alabama, again, when you got 2 of your best players out on the road against a team that's playing at the level that Ole Miss is playing at with a huge crowd, Rodney, you don't expect to win that game on paper, but they did.
Yeah, well, hey, this is a team that's gone on the road. Gary showed some fight. Obviously, other players stepped up and performed in the stead, and so that's, like you said, I mean, how much more impressive can you get on the road? And
Bama will host Texas A&M on Thursday night. All right, still to come on Tider Insider Television. Alabama football is going to be bringing in a new assistant coach on defense. We'll discuss, and there's an opening for a defensive coordinator slot too. Pete Golding, he's staying in the SEC, but he's joining the rival Ole Miss Rebels as their defensive coordinator under Lane Kiffin. We'll have that story coming up. And, of course, we'll be getting to your phone calls, emails, and tweets. As always, the phone number 205-348-WVUA. That's 348-9882. Or you can email us, TITV@WVUA23.com. We'll be right back with the only show that takes you inside the Crimson Tide, the one, the only Tider Insider TV. And welcome back to TITV, brought to you by Tuscaloosa Tourism and Sports with Rodney Orr. I'm Gary Harris. Well, Pete Golding's on the move, and I'm a member of TiderInsider.com, and it isn't just there on my radio show everywhere. Listen, Pete Golding's a good football coach. Otherwise, Ole Miss wouldn't be paying him more than $2 million. But there was pretty much a celebration amongst Alabama fans when the news came out that he was leaving to become the DC at Ole Miss. I thought he did a good job here at Alabama, but I will say this, because of the way the fans just tell it like it is, they've turned on the guy. I don't know that he could have done anything to please them, and I think Nick Saban was happy with Pete Golding. But for Pete Golding, it's a fresh start where he played college football. He played at Delta State. He can recruit that state. I think he's an upgrade for Ole Miss. I think he gives Alabama and Nick Saban a chance to kind of go in a different direction. And not that it matters for the fans, but I just see this as a win-win for everybody involved.
No, I agree with you. I think, going over there, Pete Golding, obviously, like you said, a tremendous recruiter. He's a guy that's really come a long way as a recruiter since he got here at Alabama, and now he's going to do a good job there recruiting. But, Gary, I look at him and I say, look, Lane Kiffin's going to give him that defense. This is going to be Pete Golding's defense. He'll be completely in charge. He's going to even hire a couple of coaches, talking to the Ole Miss people, of his own choice. So they're giving him free reign over there with that defense. So that'll be interesting to watch. And as far as Alabama goes, look, it's an opportunity to bring in a great coach. A lot of people asking who it is. We're just going to have to allow it to play out.
Yeah, some candidates you've heard for sure. Of course, obviously Jeremy Pruitt, Glenn Schumann, Jim Leonard, Todd Grantham, who's already on staff here. But a win for Golding, a win for Ole Miss, a win for Alabama. That is not a bad deal. Also, it's not official yet, but it has been reported that one of the top young defensive coaches in the country, Austin Armstrong, who has been the defensive coordinator at Southern Miss the last couple of years and does an incredible job. Played college football in the state at Faulkner, worked under Kirby Smart. He's going to be joining this staff in some capacity. Now, this is one of these young guys that's already proven he can run a defense. Now, he's not going to be the defense coordinator here, but to get a young, hungry coach of this talent level, it's a big pickup, I think, for Alabama.
Yeah, Gary, we've seen a lot of kind of in that mold. You're talking about, you can name several of them. Dan Lanning, who was here, that was at Georgia. Glenn Schumann, who's at Georgia now, kind of coming up in that as a really young defensive coach. And I think Austin Armstrong has worked with both those guys, worked under Kirby Smart, as you said. He's a guy that's highly respected.
Indeed. All right, when we come back, it's time to take some phone calls and answer some emails. Give us the call that you want to give us to get through at 205-348-9882. We'll be right back with phone calls and emails on Tider Insider TV. All right, we're running a little bit behind on time, so let's get right out on the phone lines. And Sammy leads us off up in Walker County. Hey, Sammy.
Hello, Gary. Hello, Rodney. My comment on the Golding was, he was never going to be a Kirby Smart, but who is? And so I believe it's a good move for Ole Miss to get him, but the consistency level with Golding, because go back a couple of years, we had a big lead over Florida in the SEC championship, and they got it down to 6. Then we play an outstanding defensive game against Ohio State. This year, we get shredded by Tennessee, then skip forward a few games to Mississippi State, and we played a sensational defensive game. It's just the consistency thing I've got with Golding.
Yeah, Sammy, I think that is something that they will be looking to improve on here this season with the defense, is to try to have more of a level of consistency. You're right. There were some outstanding defensive performances this year. And then the Tennessee game, it was a head-scratcher. There's no other way around it. I thought the plan was bad. Obviously, the execution wasn't there. That was one game, but that's the game that kind of sticks in the craw of Alabama fans, I think.
Yeah, it does. But I think, too, Gary, sometimes when I'm sitting here thinking about Georgia and everyone praises their defense, and look, take the TCU game out. That was no matchup. But in their previous 2 games, Georgia gave up over 70 points. That's an average of 35 games. Look, that's a really good defense that Georgia had. It's not as easy to play defense as it once was.
It's hard. It's difficult. That's for sure. All right, let's get over to Bessemer and talk to Johnny. Hey, Johnny, what's up, man?
Gary, what's going on, man?
Hey, brother, how you?
Hey, man, I was wondering, how good are we going to be next year, and who's going to be our quarterback next year, man?
All right, John. Yeah, I think Alabama's going to be good. How good? You can't say right now. Quarterback is the question. I said on my radio show this morning, there's going to be a full-fledged, Alabama's been blessed with a good run of quarterbacks, but there's going to be a full-fledged open quarterback competition. You're going to have all 4 scholarship quarterbacks, including 2 freshmen, here in the spring and into fall camp to kind of settle this deal.
And I think that's the good thing. Having the freshmen here, they're going to get an opportunity to compete as well. Obviously, Jalen Milroe, Ty Simpson, Eli Holstein, Dylan Lonergan, all of those guys competing, gaining experience. And look, here's the thing, and I know we don't like to speculate, but the fact is that there is a good chance there'll be a new offensive coordinator. So this is going to be a really big spring.
It is indeed. All right, we'll get to our email of the day when we come back here to Tider Insider Television. With Rodney Orr, I'm Gary Harris. Welcome back to TITV. It's time for our email question of the day, brought to you by KDM Service Corporation, serving your family like our family. That's KDM Service Corporation for all your heating and air conditioning needs. Let's get to the email question of the day, and it is from Norman in Tuscaloosa. It's too early to crown Georgia's college football's top program. Just wait until other programs start taking their top assistants. Your thoughts? Yeah, listen, Norman, right now they're on top. As I've said many times, and Rodney, I think, agrees with me, college football's fluid. I mean, listen, they're on top now. Next season, it could be completely different. 2 national championships in a row is impressive. First time since Alabama did it. They got a chance to go for a 3rd. But at the same time, nobody's going to quit trying to win because Georgia's on top. And, Georgia's the hunted. They handled it well this year. But, yeah, I mean, they're on top now. Will they be this time next year? We shall see.
Yeah, I think he makes a great point about having to replace your assistants. I mean, obviously, that's something that they haven't had as much to deal with as Alabama's had over the years. But, when you start to replace those guys like a Todd Monken, who's done a fantastic job as their offensive coordinator, it's more and more difficult getting the consistency there. All
right, let's get back out on the phone lines. And Fred is with us over in Roebuck. Hey, Fred.
How you doing?
Doing great, man.
The question I got is about basketball, and they don't play no defense at all, looks like, and their offense looks like pickup basketball.
All right, Fred, we'll take that for you. I don't know. They held LSU to 66 points, 22 in the first half. I mean, They won by, as I said, their average margin of victory in the SEC is over 20 points per game. Yeah, they play fast. They shoot it a lot. I do think they guard people pretty well. I think they protect the rim well. I'm going to disagree with you there a little bit. I think that they guard well, and people like to see points. And you have a right to your opinion. I just happen to disagree.
Scored 106.
Yeah,
that's pretty impressive.
106 to 66. I mean, that's impressive. All right, we're going to get to another email, Rod, and this is from Keith in Tuscaloosa. After the title game, Kirby made a statement about entitlement creeping into a program. I heard Bama had heard the message. I guarantee you Bama's heard that message forever. Nick Saban, a lot of what you hear from Kirby Smart, he got from Nick Saban. Let's be honest about it. Yeah, complacency, entitlement, those are things you fight against. And Kirby's right. We'll see how, Georgia handles it this year. But I guarantee you Alabama gets that message every day that they're around Nick Saban.
Yeah, you're talking about coaching changes. This is another thing, the entitlement aspect of it. When you're winning like they are on that high level, how do you deal with that? It's going to be something they're going to have to deal with.
All right. Thanks for the phone calls and the emails. And we're going to be back to wrap up this edition of TITV here in Titletown right after this. All right, this kid is special, number one in the video. Last week in Montgomery, Maryland, wide receiver Ryan Williams was named Mr. Football. He's the first sophomore to ever be named in the 41-year history of the award. He's also the 6A Back of the Year. He's an Alabama commit, although he's got a couple years of high school football. Rodney, all he did this year, 2,647 all-purpose yards and 42 touchdowns. Is he good or what?
Phenom.
I mean, just a phenomenal football player. And Alabama's going to try to hang on to him, but whew.
Dad played at Auburn.
Yeah, Dad was an Auburn player, but he says, for the record, he loves Alabama. All right, that's going to do it for the show tonight. Thanks for tuning in. A reminder that you can catch a replay tonight at 10:30 or find it anytime at WVOA23.com. For Rodney Orr, I'm Gary Harris. We're going to leave you now with video from the Alabama cheer team at the national championships. Alabama cheer, both the women's squad and the men's or co-ed squad, men's and women together, two of the best in the country. All right, we'll catch you again next week on TITV. Have a good night, everybody.